Morning, everyone.
Morning. Morning.
Thank you for coming today. Happy Sunday. Okay. Happy Sunday, I suppose. Or is it in my home, happy season restart of Walking Dead? So, the number one predictor of success, apparently, is perseverance. So you can be smart, you can be talented, you can be good looking, you can have bags of common sense, but if you don't have the ability to get up when life knocks you down, you'll never make it. And this matters because sooner or later life will knock you down. This morning we're starting a brand new unit called the Bounce Effect. So if you've ever suffered a setback, if you've ever gotten bad news, if your plans didn't go according to plan, if you ever found yourself in a place in life where there was nothing that you could do, then the next few weeks are especially for you. And if none of that applies to you, you should pay attention anyway, because sooner or later it will. The issue, if I may misquote Rocky Balboa, isn't how many times in life you get knocked down, it's how many times you can bounce back. That's what counts. And my prayer for you is that over the next few weeks, you'll rediscover the Christian virtue of perseverance, that you'll find within yourself the strength to bounce back, to pick yourself up, and to get going again. So as always, we'll take our learning from the Bible, and this morning we'll start in the Gospel according to St. Matthew, where we're told that after Jesus had finished instructing the 12 disciples, he went on from there to preach and teach in the towns of Galilee. Now, so far, so good in this sentence. What we have here is Jesus, the disciples, some preaching, and some teaching. Sentences don't get any more gospel-y than this one. Fantastic. The next sentence, however, is slightly troubling. We're told that when John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" So imagine how this scene would have played out. Jesus is teaching his disciples, and then a group of other disciples enter from stage left, who followed John the Baptist. And on John's behalf, they have a slightly offensive question to ask. Essentially, Jesus, are you who we thought we were? Because you see, Jesus, right now I'm having an expectation versus reality problem. I expected this from you, but what I ended up with was this. And you can certainly relate to the question, can you not? I expected to have a loving marriage, I ended up with a messy divorce. I expected to have lots of friends, I ended up with loneliness. I expected to enjoy my retirement, I ended up with ill health. I expected my business to be a success, I ended up with bankruptcy. The difference between what we wanted and what we got in life often causes some rather awkward questions. And John, like any other good first century Jew, has a very firm idea of what he expects his Messiah to deliver. So he expects that when the Messiah comes, the Romans will be gone, poverty will be gone, injustice will be gone, corruption will be gone. All the bad stuff will be gone, and the good times will roll. And because none of that seems to be happening, he wants to know if Jesus is like real. I mean, what's going on? And the reason, as the text says, that John can't ask this question in person is because he's in prison. And the reason he's in prison is because earlier in his career he took some ill-advised potshots at some rather sensitive political figures. The King Herod, whom you know from the Christmas story, had a bunch of sons who were all called Herod as well. So there was Herod Philip, Herod Antipas, Herod Archelaus, Herod the Small, Herod the Not So Great. I'm only making some of these up. And a whole bunch of the women in the family were called Herod as well. So there was Herodina, Herodias, and so no ego issues in the family whatsoever. Anyway, so one of Herod the Great's sons, Herod Philip, married his niece Herodias. I know. And for a few years they were quite happy, I suppose. But then Herodias' uncle husband went on a business trip to Rome, and while her uncle husband was away, she had an affair with her uncle husband's brother, who was also her uncle. So she divorces her uncle husband so she can get married to her uncle husband's brother, who then also becomes her uncle husband. Now, as you may have noticed, this is so weird it's borderline funny. And John the Baptist was one of those preachers who just couldn't let it go. Like, he had no filter, he thought it and he said it. And unfortunately for him, he was wildly successful. Pulled in huge numbers of people, and quite often he would use the crazy goings-on in Herod's family as an illustration to make a point or a joke to warm his audience up, right? Fair enough. Hey guys, good morning. Have you heard the one about Herodias, who married her uncle husband and then divorced him so she could marry her uncle husband's brother? Well, did you hear what happened at Christmas dinner? It was awesome. And everyone thought it was funny. Even the king apparently thought it was funny. Herod Antipas. And why wouldn't he? After all, he's a king who married his brother, niece, his wife. Apparently he doesn't care what anyone thinks of him. But Herodias, according to history, was incredibly sensitive. Couldn't bear the thought of being laughed at. Couldn't stand the thought of being considered a sinner in her conservative society. So she nags and nags and nags her uncle husband to have John thrown in prison, and that's what happens. Now, in jail, John has what we have when things go wrong in life. He has doubts. Remember, life is easy till it stops being easy. And now he's thinking, Jesus, are you who I thought you were? And he has good reason to be confused. After all, look at what Jesus says about him in another part of the Gospels. Jesus is talking about John the Baptist one day, and he says, I tell you, among those born of women, there has never been anyone greater. No one has ever risen higher than John the Baptist. How's that for a reference? Thank you for applying for the job, Johnson. Let's look at your references. Let me see. High school principal, previous employer, scout group leader, Son of God. Not bad. Jesus says this guy is the best guy who ever lived. Pretty good. Jesus thinks a lot of John, but now John isn't sure what he thinks about Jesus, because when Jesus hears what happened to John the Baptist, Jesus pulls a move that was, to put it mildly, disappointing. So disappointing that if I was writing the Bible, I would never have said what the Bible says, because it's too embarrassing. When Jesus hears what happened to John the Baptist, what do you think he did next? Baked him a cake with a file in it? Went to visit, broke him out, turned Herodias into a cake, fed her to the fishes? All of those would have been good, but look at what Jesus did. When Jesus heard that John had been put in prison, he returned to Galilee, leaving Nazareth. He went and lived in Capernaum, and then the text pointedly reminds us all, which is by the lake. Now, to understand how offensive this is, you need to look at a map. So, here we have a map, and I have a laser pointer. When a guy has a laser pointer, doesn't matter how old he is, he instantly becomes a child. So, when this happens, Jesus is up here in Nazareth. Okay? Hometown. This is the Dead Sea. John the Baptist worked this stretch of the Dead Sea. His entire ministry was spent here. John the Baptist gets put in prison here in Machaerus. Nasty, nasty place. When Jesus hears what's happened, you'd expect him to go, given that John is his cousin and his best friend, from him to go from here to here to at least visit. Instead, Jesus goes in the opposite direction from Nazareth up here to Capernaum by the Sea of Galilee. So he's already far away, but apparently not far away enough. He goes in the opposite direction. Next slide. Here's Machaerus. This is the prison where John is. As you can see, it's in the desert, and it's a big hill, and you've got to climb a big hill to get to the prison. It's probably the worst place in the Holy Land. Nasty environment. Next slide, here's Capernaum. Nice move, Jesus. Nice move. I'm in prison in the desert. You're at the beach. There's palm trees and stuff. So John's in prison in the desert. He's been there for about a year. And now he's had enough. And so he sends his disciples to talk to Jesus. Now you have to understand, these disciples of John the Baptist, they're good guys. In the ancient world, their prisons didn't have a catering department. They just stuck you in a hole, and if your friends and family bought you food, you ate, and if they didn't, you starved. So what that means is for weeks, months, and probably up to a year, the friends of John the Baptist have been climbing this hill to the prison of Machaerus with food in the stinking heat, climbing down into a dungeon and bringing him food every single day. And every single day, they've heard John going on about how awesome Jesus is. Jesus is the one. Jesus is the one. Jesus is the one. Jesus is going to fix this. Jesus is going to make everything better. And then as the weeks turn into months and the months turn into years, they see that John is beginning to struggle. And so some of them stay with John the Baptist because he needs food. But the rest of them travel to find Jesus. And they find him under a palm tree at the beach. Doesn't look good, does it? And so they ask this question. Jesus, sorry to interrupt you from your margarita there, but are you the one? Are you the one? I mean, no offense, but we thought we were all together here. We thought we were all working to the same end. And John was the Baptist. John the Baptist was the one who, remember what he did for you at the start of your career? Remember how he always spoke you up and praised you in front of people? Do you remember that? And he's your cousin and you think he's awesome and he's always been so loyal to you and always been so faithful to you. And He's in the worst prison in the ancient Near East. And you're sitting on a cabana. Are you the one? Or is there something else? Is there someone else? Like, have we been idiots all this time? Next sentence, Jesus replied, "Go back and report to John what you see. Tell him this: the blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor." In other words, go back and tell John all the things I'm doing for everyone else. Classy. Not sure how to put this in the Bible either. And yet this is our life, is it not? Life is working for other people. Relationships are working for other people. Success is working for other people. Health is working for other people. Everything else is working for other people. And we feel we kind of missed the bus. And there's questions. Now the reason I'm telling you all of this is because I want you to embrace the inevitability of disappointment. I think that the reason we find it hard to bounce back up is because we stupidly never expected to fall down in the first place. And to make ourselves stronger, we need to learn to be more okay with things not being okay. Our culture is obsessively focused on unrealistically positive expectations. Be happier, be healthier, be the best, be better than the rest. Be more envied, more admired, have abs, have a selfie-ready face on all day long. But when you stop and think about it, all this conventional life advice is nonsense. All the positive, happy stuff that we hear all the time is actually just focusing on what you lack. It lasers in on what you perceive to be wrong with your life and then reminds you of it. So you go and learn ways of making more money because you perceive that you don't have enough. You stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself that you're beautiful, you're beautiful, you're beautiful, because you don't feel beautiful. I think this is a feedback loop from hell, and here's the problem with it. Thanks to our "my life is cooler than yours" social media world that we live in now, we have a generation of people who think that things like failure and anxiety and boredom and fear are actually not okay and are totally unacceptable. I mean, if you look at your Facebook feed, everyone else seems to be having a great old time, don't they? Everyone seems to have a new boyfriend. A 16-year-old just sold an app for $1 million. Your cousin just went skydiving. Your BFF went snorkeling in Costa Rica. Your colleague got promoted. Your sister went trekking in the Himalayas. And you're home alone on a Friday night flossing your cat. And you just can't cope with how bad your life seems to be. Back in Grandpa's day, it wasn't like that. Back in Grandpa's day, you would just say to yourself, well, I sure do feel like a cow turd today. And then you would shrug your shoulders and say, oh well, I guess that's life. And then you go back to shoveling hay. But now we consider it absolutely unacceptable to feel bad. We consider it unacceptable for any disappointment to land on our lap at all, and we just can't cope. It is not okay for us not to be okay. And when we don't feel okay for as little a time as 5 minutes, we're bombarded with like 350 images of everyone else who seems to be amazingly happy, and we think there's something wrong with us because there's something wrong with us. That's it in a nutshell. We think there's something wrong with us because there's something wrong with us. And it makes life so very difficult. And this is why the bounce effect begins with the acknowledgement that it's okay not to be okay. That just because there's something wrong with us doesn't mean there's something wrong with us. Can we all agree on this? It's okay not to be okay sometimes. Life, like contrary to everything you've heard, life is not supposed to be awesome and exciting and amazing and fulfilling all the time. Now, of course, don't get me wrong, there are moments like that. And they are awesome and they are exciting. But in between those moments, there's other moments that are just boring and annoying and frustrating and difficult. And that is why all this how to be happy stuff that gets rammed down our throat all the time these days is actually bad for us. There's a backwards law that says the more you pursue feeling happy, the less happy you will feel. Because that pursuit just reinforces the fact that you felt unhappy in the first place. Right? So the more rich, the more you want to be rich, the more poor you will feel, regardless of how rich you actually are. As Albert Camus famously said, you'll never be happy if you continue to search for what happiness consists of. You'll never live if you're too busy searching for the meaning of life. What this means, essentially, is that the entire self-help section at the bookstore is actually unhelpful. This week I had to go into Chapters to get a book I needed, and They have those computers, and you search for your book and it tells you here it is, and it pointed me to the self-help section, which always annoys me to death. I actually find the phrase contradictory. If you needed help, if you did it yourself, technically you didn't need help, did you? I think, at least. Anyway, so I was amazed at the self-help section of this particular chapter's bookstore, how big it was. 2 long shelves, double-sided, packed with, I didn't count them, but certainly 1,000 or so books, more, essentially on how to make yourself happy. And they all made me angry. I wanted to say to everyone who was standing around the bookstores, surely no truly happy people would be here looking at these books. Surely no truly happy people buys a book on how to be happy. No? That would have been rude, but I didn't say it. But what's dangerous about living with the delusion of enforced happiness is that the more we coddle ourselves from a healthy dose of pain in life, the more disconnected we become from the reality of life, and the less able we are to deal with it when it eventually goes wrong, as it always does. We like the idea that we can fix all our problems. We like the idea that there is some ultimate form of happiness that can be attained. But this is probably a lie. When you ask someone what they want in life, they always say something awesome but banal, like, I want to be happy and have a great family and a great job. Well, of course, everyone wants that. Everyone wants to live a carefree, happy, easy life. It's easy to want those things. But the more interesting question to ask is, what pain do you want in your life? What setbacks? What agonies? What is it you're willing to struggle for and fight through? For example, everyone wants the corner office with the 6-figure salary, but not everyone wants the 75 hours a week required to get there. The word success in our culture has never been so widely used as it is today, and yet it has never been so poorly understood. What determines success in life isn't what we want to enjoy. Everyone wants to enjoy. The real question is, what pain are we willing to sustain and fight through? The path to happiness is full of these things. And before the bounce must come the fall. For John the Baptist, it was easy till it stopped being easy. Never had an unsuccessful day in ministry. The day he started, he was pulling in huge numbers. Total outlier. Thousands of people travelled hundreds of miles just to take in one of his sermons. Thousands of them hanging on his every word, laughing at his every joke, crying at his every emotive speech. Loved it. Even when he got arrested, it was probably okay. Probably felt kind of righteous. Felt like a martyr. Felt like he was on the right track. And anyway, he wasn't bothered because his faith was solid. And it's easy to go through things when your faith is solid. It's easy to go through pain when you don't have doubt. Jesus will come soon. Jesus will fix this. Jesus will make everything okay. But then as the days turn into weeks, and the weeks turn into months, and the months turn into years, the dream begins to die. Questions turn into doubts. Doubts turn into disbelief and disillusionment. Everything I lived for becomes a big question. Suddenly faith isn't so easy. It stops being helpful and becomes torture. And so he says, Jesus, are you the one? And then Jesus says something that they didn't teach us when we were kids in Sunday school. Look at what Jesus says. Blessed is the one who does not stumble on account of me. Jesus is admitting it here. He's saying to the friends of John the Baptist as he's in this beach environment, yeah, you're right. I could have and I didn't. I should have and I won't. This is how it looks. The way it is the way it is. And he gets that messy reality of life can be too much for some people. Now look at the word blessed in the sentence. This is the Greek word makarios, which can also be translated as happiness. Happy is the one who does not get tripped up in life because of me, or more pointedly, because of what I don't do, and what I don't fix, and what I don't solve. In other words, there is a happiness to be found in acknowledging that life does not always work out the way you want. There is a happiness to be found in saying, I feel bad today. Oh well, that's the way it is. Back to shoveling hay. There is a happiness to be found in saying, I feel bad. And I'll be all right with it. I'll get through it. Happy is the one who follows me in spite of me. When it doesn't work, when it all goes wrong, when I don't help, when it seems like I don't care. I've learned very little about life and faith from the seasons of my life in which life and faith were easy. But when life turned against me, when Jesus had, it seemed, turned his back on me, it is in those times that I learned the most about life and about the meaning of faith and belief. And this is why I often think that the place of frustration is often the place of greatest discovery. Sometimes you don't know about faith until faith is hard to have. And this is why we should not despise the struggle. It's great when life is great, don't get me wrong. But when it's a struggle, don't despise it. Because those times can be awesome too. There's value in the struggle. There's gold in the struggle. Fight through it, and you'll bounce back sooner or later. You will. Any questions on any of that? All of you, whose faces I can at least see in the dark, have a very disappointed look on your face. And, you know, I get it. It's so much more encouraging to hear, here's how Jesus will fix everything, and here's some strategies you can apply to bounce back. And we'll get to a little bit of that in the coming weeks. But you have to accept reality for what it is. Before you begin to fight through, you have to face the fight square on. Remember what Winston Churchill said to Britain at the start of World War II? I got nothing to offer you but blood, sweat and tears. No happy stories here, just reality. Despising the reality of your life won't get you anywhere. You've got to start there, face it, and eventually you'll fight through. You will. More on this next week. Thank you for coming. God bless you. See you next week.